Hello students. Okay, we're going to look at some slightly different questions. Now what we're going to do here is actually just use mainly common sense to answer them, and we can do that because we've got some really nice numbers up here. What this is basically telling us is the real object, the real length, is 100 times the scale length. So if you're given the scale length, all you have to do is multiply by 100 and then convert your answer to meters. So let's go ahead and try doing it that way rather than sitting out the ratios, etc. So just using a bit of common sense is going to make these a lot easier. So the scale length is 2 centimeters. The scale is 1 to 100, so therefore just multiply 2 centimeters by 100, and I know that the actual length is 200 centimeters. Then I convert it to meters. Well, I do that by dividing by 100 because there's 100 centimeters in a meter, and I get 2 meters. So quite easy if you do it that way. Okay, let's try this one. 8 millimeters is the scale length. The scale is 1 is to 100, so the real length is going to be 100 times that, which is 800 millimeters. And then all we have to do is convert it to meters. In this case, is 1,000 millimeters in a meter, so I divide by 1,000, and I get 0.8 meters. Okay, you go ahead and try the next two, please. Okay, welcome back. Well, this one's going to be done much the same as the one above it. There's 100 centimeters in a meter, so I just multiply that by 100, and that gives me 4030 centimeters. Had to move my decimal point 2 places to the right, and then I got to convert that into meters, so I got to basically move it back again, and I get 40.3 meters. In fact, for both of these questions, a really smart student might just say, well, the scale factor is 1 to 100. There's 100 centimeters in a meter, so I can just change the units. That doesn't always work, of course, so you got to know what you're doing if you're going to try that method. Okay, what about 23 millimeters? Well, once again, we got to multiply it by 100 to get the actual length, so it's 2300 millimeters is the actual length, and then we've got to convert that to meters, so we move the decimal point back 3 places, and the actual length is 2.3 meters. Okay, on the next page, we're going to go back the other way. This time we're given the actual length, and we need to work backwards and find out what the diagram length is, or what the scale length is. Same idea, because it's 1 is to 300, we can, in this case, we can just divide to get from the meters in the actual length to the millimeters in the scale length. So let's go ahead and do the first one. Okay, the first thing we have to do, because we want the answer in millimeters, is convert this to millimeters. So we multiply by 1,000, and that gives us 6,000 millimeters. So that's the actual length. We need now to divide by 300 to get the scale length. So 6,000 divide 300. You can knock off a couple of zeros or divide by 100 is what I'm actually doing. And 60 divide 3 is 20. So the actual length is 20. Sorry, the drawing length is 20 millimeters. So that 20 millimeters with this scale gives us an actual length of 6 meters, which looks about right. Okay, let's try the next one. Okay, we've got a scale ratio of 1 is to 4,000. We want to answer in millimeters, so I've got to change 16 kilometers into millimeters. So I'm going to do that in 2 steps. Kilometers to meters, multiply by 1,000. So that gives me 16,000 meters, and convert 16,000 meters to millimeters. I multiply by 1,000 again, and I get 16 million millimeters. Okay, now I've got to, that's the actual length. The scale ratio is 1 is to 4,000. So now I need to divide 16 million by 4,000. So once again, I can knock off 3 zeros, knock off 3 zeros. I get 16,000 divided by 4 is 4,000. So the scale ratio in this case is 4,000 millimeters. And they ask us to leave it in millimeters, so I'm not going to simplify that or change that down to meters. Okay, you have a go, please, at the next two. Okay, welcome back. So once again, we're getting everything into millimeters. So let's convert 50 centimeters into millimeters. So 50 centimeters is 500 millimeters. Make that look like a 0. I think I made it worse anyhow, and that looks like a 0. I think I'm going to fix those up. I need to write more neatly, I think. So 50 centimeters, that's almost good, equals 500 millimeters. And again, this is the actual length. The diagram length is going to be that divided by 20. So 500 millimeters divide 20. Well, let's see, I can knock off a 0, knock off a 0. 50 divide 2 is 25. So the scale length of the drawing diagram length is going to be 25 millimeters. Okay, and the last one, very similar to the top one, 12 kilometers. Let's convert that to meters, is 12,000 meters. Let me get rid of this. And 12,000 meters equals 12 million millimeters. And now I have to divide 12 million by 50,000. Let's see if I can do this one without using a calculator. Okay, well, I can knock off 3 zeros, knock off 3 zeros, knock off an extra 0, knock off an extra 0. And I've got 1,200 divided by 5. Well, 5 goes into 120, 24 times, and then add an extra 0. So that's going to be 240 millimeters is my diagram length. Okay, so we'll leave it at that, and I think we have one more video on scale drawing.